to suspend the rules and agree to Resolution House Res H-Con Res 103 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the concurrent resolution.
House Concurrent Resolution 103, concurrent resolution supporting the goals and ideals of Malaria Awareness Day.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Payne, and the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Boozman, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on the resolution under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of this resolution, H-Con Res 103, supporting the goals and ideals of Malaria Awareness Day. April 25th of each year is recognized internationally as Africa Malaria Day, and in the United States as Malaria Awareness Day. I introduced this resolution with my colleague and Congressional Malaria Caucus co-chair, Congressman John Boozman of Arkansas, a true partner in the fight against malaria and so many other good causes. And I would like to thank him for his partnership and his continued commitment to ending malaria and to so many other important issues pertaining to Africa. We introduced this resolution to remind the Congress, the country, and the world that malaria is preventable and is treatable. Malaria was eliminated from the United States over 50 years ago, yet more than 40% of the world's population is still at risk of contracting this disease. The World Health Organization reports that malaria claims the lives of nearly 1 million people each year, the vast majority of whom are children under the age of 5 in Africa. I ask you to reflect on the statistics. Malaria takes a life of a child roughly every 30 seconds. This is simply astounding and unconscionable in 2009. Malaria also causes a great risk to maternal health, causing complications during delivery, anemia, and low birth weight, which estimates by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention that malaria infection causes 400,000 cases of severe maternal anemia and from 75,000 to 200,000 infant deaths annually in sub-Saharan Africa. An estimated 90% of the deaths from malaria occur in Africa. Malaria also perpetuates poverty. The Rollback Malaria Partnership estimates that malaria costs African countries $12 billion annually in lost economic productivity. The malaria burden also weakens governments' abilities to provide services. World Health Organization estimates that malaria accounts for 40% of healthcare expenditures in high-burden countries, demonstrating that effective long-term malaria control is inextricably linked to the strength of the health systems. However, there is good news. Heightened efforts by our own government and by other partner nations have made significant progress in the fight against malaria. The President's Malaria Initiative has purchased more than 13 million altruism, which is really ACT, a new therapy or a therapy that works, which will protect over 17 million people through spraying, a campaign that has been aggressively started in a number of African countries, and distribute over 6 million insecticide-treated bed nets. The Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria has distributed 7 million bed nets to protect families from malaria and provided 74 million malaria patients with ACT. As the World Bank's booster program is scheduled to commit more than $500 million in International Development Association's funds for malaria, this will help to move forward the control of malaria, approximately $500 million by the International Development Association. Public and private partnerships are developing effective and affordable drugs to treat malaria, with more than 23 types of malaria vaccines in development. Years ago, there was virtually no vaccines in development, and so we have seen that the world has taken a real look at this dread disease, and we're moving forward to its elimination. This resolution calls our attention to Malaria Awareness Day, which the Congressional Malaria Caucus marked by holding briefings, a roundtable with African health officials, and we'll conclude with the progress made, also reaffirming the goals and commitments to combat malaria outlined in the Thomas Lantos and Henry J. Hyde United States Global Leadership Against HIV/AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria Reauthorization Act of 2008, which provided critical funding, $6 billion, to fight malaria and tuberculosis. Let us remain committed to ending malaria for the health and wealth of the entire world. I strongly support this resolution, and I urge my colleagues to do likewise. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Arkansas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
As co-chair with Chairman Payne of the Congressional Malaria Caucus and an original co-sponsor of this resolution brought forth by Chairman Payne, I rise in support of H-Con Res 103, which supports the goals and ideals of a Malaria Awareness Day. It is widely known that malaria was eradicated in the United States more than a half-century ago. Less known is the fact that malaria still affects as many as 500 million people in 109 countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and that malaria kills approximately 1 to 3 million people per year. Africa has been particularly hard hit. 90% of all malaria deaths occur in Africa. It is the leading cause of death of children under the age of 5, claiming the lives of an estimated 3,000 African children per day. And because even mild cases of malaria can be debilitating, many businesses have been forced to hire 2 or more employees to fill a single position due to absenteeism. It's estimated that Africa loses $12 billion in productivity each year, all because of a wretched mosquito. But with the commitment of host countries and generous donor support, including through the President's Malaria Initiative, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria, the World Bank, private donors, and non-governmental organizations, including Malaria No More, we are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Mass distributions of mosquito nets, indoor residual spraying, and the development and distribution of safe and effective, inexpensive drugs to treat malaria have yielded sharp declines in malaria-related deaths in a number of African countries. According to U.S. Malaria Coordinator Admiral Tim Ziemer, these efforts are bringing newfound hope that malaria is not an intractable problem and giving children a fighting chance to improve their quality of life and build better futures. But we still have a long way to go. Malaria Day serves as a call to arms, a day to mobilize resources and recommit ourselves to the fight against this very preventable disease. It reminds us that with the steadfast commitment of donors, host governments, local leaders, and the countless heroes who are fighting to roll back this scourge on the ground each and every day, we may live to see the elimination of malaria from the developing world. I thank the sponsor and my fellow co-chair of the House Malaria Caucus, Mr. Payne, for introducing this important measure and for agreeing to a modest, though critically important changes which enabled us to move the resolution directly on the House floor today. I appreciate the chairman for his hard work and leadership combating this disease, but also for his chairmanship of the Africa Subcommittee of the Foreign Affairs Committee. I urge my colleagues to support this resolution and yield back the balance of my time.
Does the gentleman wish to yield back the balance of his time?
At this time, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from American Samoa.
Gentleman from New Jersey will suspend.
I'm sorry, I thought that he didn't have any additional, so I will reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman wishes to reserve the balance of his time.
Yes, sir.
Gentleman from New Jersey. Gentleman from New Jersey.
I recognize the gentleman from American Samoa, Mr.
Gentleman from American Samoa is recognized for a minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and Mr. Speaker, I thank you for this opportunity to speak out in full support of this proposed legislation. Not only am I a co-sponsor, but I want to commend especially my colleague and friend, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Africa, as well as in global health. Mr. Speaker, this issue is serious. 40% of the world's population, some 6 billion people living in this world, is still impacted and affected by this serious disease, malaria. And outside of that, some 800 million people living in the continent of Africa, 90% of the people living in Africa are also affected by this serious disease. I want to thank the gentleman from New Jersey for his initiative and leadership in proposing this legislation, and sincerely hope that in our efforts in working through the authorizing committees that we will build on what this gentleman has, the chairman of our subcommittee has done to bring to the attention of our colleagues and to the American people the importance of what we need to do as a country to help get rid of this serious disease, just as the initiative taken. May I take 30 more seconds?
I yield 30 seconds additional to the gentleman.
The gentleman is recognized for an additional 30 seconds.
And as much as also that I want to commend my good friend from New Jersey, working quietly and patiently, but tremendous effort in working with our colleagues in addressing the serious problems of HIV/AIDS. And that, Mr. Speaker, again, I want to thank my good friend from New Jersey for his leadership and for the work that he's done in trying to get rid of this dreaded disease. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas.
I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Arkansas yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from New Jersey.
I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New Jersey yields back the balance of his time. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to House Concurrent Resolution 103 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The concurrent resolution is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.